Welcome to the How We Get Through podcast, where we share stories, mental health insights, and healing advice on life's everyday challenges. I'm your host, Jen, and today's guest is Leslie Slemmons, a licensed social worker from South Carolina. In this episode, Leslie explores how intergenerational trauma can impact our anxiety and how we can separate what is ours and what is generational. And of course, focus on the powerful mind-body connection and how it can help us understand and move through mom anxiety. Excited for you to check it out. Welcome back. We are with licensed counselor Leslie Slemmons, who specializes in anxiety, body image, women's issues, and intergenerational trauma. Leslie is a licensed social worker and a 200-hour yoga trained teacher in South Carolina, and she's a mom of 4. If you missed the last episode, go ahead and check it out as we get to know more about Leslie and her path in becoming a counselor. And today she is back and going to give us some tips on noticing and getting through our own mom anxiety. Welcome back, Leslie.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Yay. Okay, so we did a deep dive into our own experiences, and I think we got really expansive on how society doesn't show up for women and doesn't give us enough space or support to help us through these things. So in the world that we live in, what are some things that we can take control of, or some things that we can move through to help us feel better?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest pieces is starting to acknowledge that this is real and that this exists. I think that so many of us are sometimes not, I guess, in denial, but also, right, like we talked about in the previous episode, like that there, because we now know that, and that maybe we're all acknowledging that there's little space for moms to show up for themselves or really even have that moment to like reflect. I think that goes back to like why this course feels so important is to just start to normalize and verbalize and inform that this is real, like that mom anxiety is a real thing. You don't have to have, all of these like postpartum symptoms, right? It's not that you just need medication. It's that like everyone who is a mom is going to have some level of mom anxiety, and that not that that's okay, but that like it is so important to recognize it so that we then can move into like, okay, now what do we do? Like, what do we need? So I think that's like the first thing that I really want to just like emphasize is how important I think it is to just have this feel like we can talk about this and that this is so necessary to talk about this.
Yeah, so kind of taking away the stigma or the shame, or that I have to like meet a certain diagnosis, or it's not that bad, or or what we see on the news or anything else. Like we're just trying to normalize that tinge of anxiety that we all freaking feel, and that's okay, and we can move through that. But if we're going to pretend that we don't have it or that it doesn't exist for us, then we're really doing ourselves a disservice in that way.
Yeah, right. Because, there's like an internal reaction to what we're probably knowing is not right? Like that we do feel like something is off. And then instead of like moving into it, right, we try to often move away from it. So whether that's like, just not being able to go out for a girls' night and meet up with other people because you're just so tired, right? Like, or, just noticing that like your family's calling you and you're not picking up your phone, so those are like, can feel, I guess what I want to say is that like sometimes we can just feel so isolated because we feel like we're alone in what we're experiencing, and you're really not, like I said, I've yet to meet a mom who doesn't, at least to some extent, nod their head when you talk about mom anxiety, right?
Yes.
Like there is that piece, and it's just not, it's not as commonly talked about, or, so I think that
Yeah.
that is a huge first step of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that also kind of reminds me of another point that I feel like this generation of parenting, like gentle parenting, we're trying to course correct or do a lot of things, try to heal our own selves in that. And that also can kind of come with this anxiety or expectation anxiety of like, oh no, I'm fucking up my kids, or like my kids are going to blah or blah, you know, and that we acknowledging that we are, the more that we heal ourselves, like that's what we can control and that's what we can do. And we will mess up and we will be okay and we can repair. But it is like parenting in general or in today gives us a lot of anxiety of like, are we doing it right or are we not doing it right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that, being a part of like the information world where
Yeah.
we have such an access to so much information,
Yeah.
cue overwhelm, right? Like
Yes.
it's almost
Yes.
like there's so many choices. And, it's funny. I was having a conversation with one of my friends who was talking to her mom about like school, right? And like, when I went to school, Mom, how did you decide? She's like, I didn't decide,
Yeah.
like you just
Yes.
went to school. Like, whereas now
Yes.
there's like Montessori and Waldorf and like, private, public, and school
Yes.
choice. Like, there's
Yep.
so many options,
Yeah.
which, absolutely make parenting feel that sense of overwhelm.
Yeah. 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 So it's just interesting as we keep talking, there's like layers upon layers of anxiety or things that can make us more anxious. And so again, denying that mom anxiety doesn't exist feels silly, right? But we also like I don't know, sometimes we can like pride ourselves like, well, that doesn't happen for me, or that won't happen to me, or it doesn't look like that, or so what would you even kind of name mom anxiety as? Like, what are some examples that you hear? What are some examples that you feel so that we can get kind of really clear of like, and it's going to be different for everybody, right? But where can we start kind of pinpointing how anxiety, like what it looks like for us individually?
Yeah. So in the course, we go into this in more detail. And one of the things I was so excited as we were, talking about it and then creating is that, using the fight, flight, freeze, and faint response as, right. So that's often where our nervous system takes in information that, things are coming too quickly. And as a response, our nervous system is like, hey, I need you to survive. I'm going to protect you. And this is a way I'm going to help your body be able to live. And
Yeah.
so we go into this fight, flight, freeze, or faint response. So for me, the naming anxiety by looking through that lens of, it's like in the course, it's like we went really concrete of like, for instance, a way that anxiety could manifest is through, for instance, frustration.
Yeah.
And like you named mom rage, right?
Yes.
Like that is such a form of anxiety. Like I'm feeling too much. And I, my body can't take all of this in. And so I am responding and getting mad at my partner for not doing the dishes, right? Or not helping in the way that I need help in that moment. And then getting annoyed that he's asking me like, well, what is it that you need? Right? Like, I
Yes.
don't.
You should know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I think we have, for instance, anxiety commonly gets informed as the feeling of, that we are in that like hyper arousal. So, either we are, feeling a sense of heightened nervousness, and it could be very much somatic. So sometimes our like hands are sweaty or our heart is racing. and to the point where it sometimes feels like we're panicky or we feel like out of our body in a way. A lot of people describe anxiety as being like your thoughts are just racing and they can't stop. Like, so it's keeping you up at night, you're not sleeping well, or you're just constantly going to like what ifs or worst case scenarios and feeling like those things are really real and true. Um, sometimes there can be such a heightened fear or like a phobia in a sense, and that like, so we try to do everything to avoid having to experience certain things. So I think those are how anxiety are commonly, known. But for moms, often that has to do with regards to our children. So that's where the unique nuance happens, is that the anxiety is experienced in, in raising your children, or your, I think your whole household, your family, and how it's, I think, more specific to that responsibility.
Yes, yes. I love that. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about like for me, it feels like this external anxiety, which isn't a great word to say, but and also the internal anxiety. And I'll give you an example of like the external anxiety I feel with my children is that something bad is going to happen to them, or they're going to get taken away, or a bad accident or something like that. And then the internal anxiety I have is I'm overwhelmed with my children in my home, and
Yeah.
I'm starting to get anxious, overwhelmed, ragey, fighting kind of feel. So it's interesting because it's kind of this spectrum around, like it shows up in different ways, but there's an overwhelm and then there's a fear one, but they're still kind of manifesting in a similar spot or coming from a similar spot of like, I'm scared and I feel out of control.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like for me, it's showed up with all my kids is when I have someone care for them. So whether it's a babysitter or my mother-in-law does a day right now. And, for instance, my mother-in-law, like she is someone that I trust, like I have a great relationship with, right? Like I know these things. I know, she's been a mom and she is amazing. But when, especially in the beginning, when I first leave my kids, right, my body does not feel like those things are true. My body is like, totally, like you said, going to this place of like something horrible is going to happen to them and I'm not going to be there. Even right now, my youngest is starting to eat. And so there's oh my gosh, she's going to choke, right? Like, what foods are you giving her? And, make sure you cut them up small. And she's still learning to eat, right? So it's, and so for me, that's the anxiety. And then I'm at work and I'm not able to focus and be present to my clients because, there is a part of me and a big part of me that is not there, and that is pulling me away from being in the moment and being present to that.
Right.
And that, to me, again, goes so nuanced to mom anxiety because of that relationship and that, that pulling of being almost in two places at once all the time.
Yes, exactly. And I like that you mentioned that like lack of presence, because I think it was one of my therapists that said to me, like, anxiety is the space between now and a future event, right? And so in motherhood, there's so many unknown future events that we're trying to correct for, right? Like the choking or like the fighting or the hitting or something bad, freak accident, whatever happening. And so we're trying to like control that, or we're trying to keep our kids safe because it's our job. It's our duty, right? And so that can kind of like go into overdrive and cause that anxiety of like, well, am I keeping my kids safe, right? And I think a lot of times what has helped me is I remember I have a partner. Like I remember that I am half the equation here, that I have support, and this isn't for everybody, right? But like if my kids are like I don't know, misbehaving or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, that's also your kid too. Like, I don't have to take all that, you know?
Yeah,
I don't have to
yeah,
take all that
yeah.
shame or that responsibility around that. And so if something happens, we will figure it out together.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I think that has just been helpful of like unloading some of that. Some of that responsibility, some of that invisible load of motherhood that keeps us kind of in that, well, you're the mom. You have to be the one.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's bringing to my mind too, and I think particularly because I also love to work on like intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
You're right. Like it reminds me of like, so for instance, in my background, I'm Filipino American. And, I think one of the legacy burdens that has been not just a part of my family, but just the culture in general is this need to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
yeah.
For it in my system, that burden felt really true that like you have to move this way, and that because of that burden, like you have to survive. And so just move forward, just, take it all and do what you need to. And so, in some of my own work of like releasing that, that fear that was never mine to own, but was just there. Once I was able to, release that, then again, it created that space of like, oh yeah, like you said, I do have a partner and I can trust that I can give that up. But for me personally, because of the trauma, for a long time, I wasn't able to do that. And yeah, right now, like you said, like that is so true. And that feels now true in my body, that is a reliable source. It's not all on me.
Yeah. Which I think is a great, like, and maybe this isn't a tip, but I think it's a good question to ask of where is anxiety kind of passed down for you? Like what is yours and what isn't? And it's such a tricky question to ask someone, but I think it's like if you have your parents here, like can you kind of be an investigator around them, right? With your kids or with you? Like do you see them a little bit more anxious in things or with the children? And like doesn't mean like that is your generational anxiety that's being passed on, but I think it becomes less of you in a vacuum and more of like, oh, I actually have the same fears my mom has, right? And my mom's first generation American. They came from Hungary, so it's different. But the war and like my grandma like cleaning houses and like growing up poor, making clothes, like they gave me everything. Like, but it's funny when the pandemic hit, I felt that like we have to prepare. Like there will not be something after. And I remember saying, I'm like, why? Obviously, this feels intense because it's a pandemic and everything, and there's no toilet paper. But there felt like a deeper thing here that was like magnified. And I could get teary about it. Leslie, I'm teary. And that's how I know if I'm even like my body is like responding to something right now, right? This is like real time. I was like, wow, this is just heavy. There's something more here that isn't mine. And learning that or that process of that or learning to like take that off takes time. And obviously some of it's still there, but it is kind of just helps you give a little bit of clarity that again, it's not just you or you're so fucked up or you're so anxious or you're out of control, right? But it's these like generational pulls that gives us a better picture of who we are and what we are dealing with today.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, one, that was so beautiful to kind of go there. And one of my favorite questions or inquiry points in internal family systems when doing this work is, and again, it's hard because you can't really think about it. It has to be more felt, but like what percentage is yours and what percentage is not? And for me, my parts have always been really like spot on telling me like 70%, right? And that, you know, and that to me has been like, oh my gosh, that is not mine. Like I
Mm.
carry it, but I don't have to continue to carry it.
Yes. Yes. And that in itself, might release your anxiety, right? Like
Mhm.
that within itself might be healing, where anxiety feels a little more functional than overwhelming or overbearing. Like
Yeah.
that acknowledgement of the family weight being lifted off.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then it's no longer paralyzing, right? Then your system is no longer taking in that information like it was in the past, of like literally, right? Like my ancestors needed to survive. And so
Yes.
that is real and true. And it did feel real and true for me because
Yeah.
I am them and they are me.
Aw,
And
yeah.
so letting that, and then with that, I think the beauty of sometimes we forget that when we release burdens, we also let heirlooms in because it creates space. And so there's
Aw.
room then to take in really what we need. And so, for me, yeah, it was that trust. It was that I could lean on to people and I didn't have to do things all on my own. And that felt more available because, that is such a beautiful heirloom that couldn't
Yeah.
exist because the burden was there. And once that was released, then there
Yeah.
was space for that.
God, I love that. I love that. I'll have to think about what my I'm like, I don't know if I guess I'm there a little bit, but yeah, it's just interesting. The more work you do, the more you can connect it again. And it just feels like everything makes sense. You're like, this is the puzzle and this is where I fit in that puzzle. And it's not just I'm the problem or I'm a bad mom or I'm, stuck on something. And so I love that. That's so beautiful.
Mhm.
I'm curious of like body wise, somatic wise, where's the scale of like, here's where anxiety feels helpful, and then here's where it feels overwhelming and paralyzing? Because obviously we can experience a range around that. And in my mind, and we've talked about this a lot before, of like our belief of emotions are neutral in a sense, right? And so, what is your anxiety telling you? And also, sometimes it gets to a point where maybe we weren't able to cue in and listen earlier. And so now it's kind of run off and done its thing, and we feel so out of control. So, where do we, what do you think about that scale? What do we do with that scale? How can that be helpful for us?
Well, yeah, right. Well, I love the idea of using a scale because I think it is really personal. That in some bodies, their tolerance or their own internal experience of something can feel more functional than for someone else.
Yeah.
And again, it's not right or wrong. I think it's just really personal. And so, yeah, going into that first part of that about the body is where, you know, there are different channels in which we can sense something. So when I say body, I do include mind, which I think is a little different. In I think in the Western world, we have so separated those beings,
Ah,
right?
yes.
Like the
Yes, I do
mind is,
that
yeah.
in
So
therapy. Yeah. So that's
yeah,
good.
so right. So I want to kind of change that language a bit, that for me, body is body mind system, which is totally interconnected. So a thought is the body, right? The thought is the body speaking in a certain way. My hands being sweaty is the body speaking in a certain way. This feeling that comes within me that is grabbing my chest is the body speaking in a certain way. So, yeah, so I think that, um, noticing how your body speaks to you
Yeah.
can be great insight.
Yeah.
And for me, the only way that I've found that relationship has been through some form of practicing how to do that. Um, it's looked different. My practice has really changed, but, showing up for myself in a certain way where I'm not just like in my chaos and, in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes it's been through therapy, sometimes it's been by myself, sometimes it's been in meditation, sometimes it's been in doing yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it can really, that practice can look really unique and different to you. Yeah, does that make sense about the body and mind? Because I think
Yes.
sometimes we lose that.
No, I love that. That's mind blowing for me. Like, it makes sense. I talk a lot about like connecting the two, right? Like you're feeling a little more heady right now. Like, what does your heart say? Like, if you were to drop down, like those are kind of the languages or the language that I use. But it isn't that. But that means that they're cut off, right? That they're kind of like too separate in some way. And so I think really that if they are connected, what are they saying to each other versus like what's the other one? I don't know, just like that cutting off. So I love that. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah, because then I think in moving in that direction of like that is the body, then that already shows that there is that desire for connection, right? That
Yeah.
like, instead of kind of moving in this way of like, think about how we deal with differences, right? Like you are this and I am this.
Yeah.
There's already then a sense of separation. So if we just
Yes.
move into that idea that there is union here.
Ooh.
Now they might be mad at each other because they
Right.
haven't believed that to be true, but there is a union that is there. And that
Yeah.
is, what we're gonna embrace and remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I also love that you kind of mentioned that as we grow as moms, there will be different like access points into our healing or into our mind body connection or into our practice, as you say. Like, it's not going to look like 5 a.m. I wake up and do a warm lemon water and journal and then meditate for 12 minutes. Like, I think we have an idealized way of what like that like dropping into our bodies or connecting to our bodies looks like. And it could be like when you're doing the dishes and you find yourself like with racing heart, or it could be like feeling really overwhelmed and like wanting to scream or feeling tension in your hands. Like there's different ways that our body is like including us into something and offering this invitation inward that we've learned of like, oh, this is a bad thing. I need to like get away from it. But really it's this invitation in of like, oh, you're needing something, girlfriend. Like you're needing something or you're needing a break or you're needing, I mean, I think you talked about this before, but like giving yourself that space, whatever that looks like, gives you enough time, hopefully, right? To like just the act of it, like, oh, let's just check in for a second because you're not the way that you want to be right now. So what are you needing? What is needing to happen for you to feel a little bit more aligned or a little bit more regulated to then keep going on with your day or to connect with your kids or to do something, right? Because I think I find myself again like overwhelmed in multiple spots. And even my like response time, I'm like, okay, let me just take a break. But I am not fully regulated and I go back in and I'm like, whoa, like it's just worse, But yeah. But
How to meet yourself in those moments, And I think that is where, overwhelm cannot exist with compassion.
Ooh.
Right? So meeting yourself in that.
That's so true. And in my experience of that, the overwhelm turns into rage. And when I can go to compassion, it's tears. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's like I get, like, it's right there. It's right here at the eyes. Like it's just the tears. And like that has been really transformative for me, but it's been like this step by step by step. And so this is what I also like want to like tell everybody too, is like this work is hard, and it's almost like peeling back another layer and another layer and another layer and another layer. But for me, I don't know if it's ever like going to feel like, oh, I am like fully aligned all the time. And, you know, like everything is great, because I think I get greater and greater capacity, but it's when you're in it, you're in it.
Yeah. And those moments that, like, again, I think this is where compassion can show up, is then you can move into those moments of like, I actually think it's important for my daughter to see me mad as a woman, right? To know that, like, God damn it.
I've never had that thought. Like, I've never had that thought. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yes. Like, that is so important, right?
Yeah.
To know that you can be angry, you can express that anger, and it's not aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Anger is a big emotion. It carries passion. I don't have to throw things.
Yes.
I can be angry, and you as my daughter can see that and know that you too will feel angry at some things, and you should.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you should.
That's so good. And this is just another point of like either going to therapy or talking to moms or taking the course of normalizing. I've never heard somebody say it's okay for your daughter to see you angry. And I'm going to get teary again, right? I'm like, no, it's a shame thing, and I need to be shameful about it and fix it right away. Like, there was no room for that, because it's in my own internal dialogue. But when we get to talk about it, then it gets to be like, oh, well, maybe there's a different way of thinking about this. So then I can have more compassion for myself. Like, that is okay. Leslie, don't make me cry again. I mean, I cry in every podcast, but but you know, with you, I always cry more. I always cry a little more. Oh, but it's so good. I just, you know, I'm a body type too. I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. Like, I just like easily cry. And that's the interesting thing, is like, I'm so quick to rage, but I actually can be so quick to be sad and emotional, and like learning to tap into that. What would that look like if I could tap into that more? I'll keep you guys posted.
Yeah. Let us know how it goes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Leslie, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about anxiety, or do you feel like we covered it in a really good way?
Yeah, you know, I just probably want to just end on the note of like, you know, going into like, gosh, what would the world look like if we could just show up? I had a dream the other night, and I texted my college girlfriend, so I'll just share it very quickly, that in the dream, it was the world, there was an after college. So when you reached 40, you, as women, went to a special college that was like a second career. And so there were grandmas that ran these colleges, and they met with you one-on-one, and you left for like 2 weeks, and there was support in the home so that you could go to these colleges, and there someone would kind of mentor you, like you would journey through your life and then talk about the next, you know, step of your life and how to move you in this way. And like, that is the world that I dream of. Like, that is the world that I think is like how it could exist, right? It could.
Wow.
It could exist.
Okay, Joe made me cry even more. That sounds so beautiful. And it also sounds like something that I feel that you could create. Like, I'm not, you heard it here first, everyone. Like, I don't know if it's going to be called college, but I love that idea of like this taking care, like shepherding in, coming alongside, like mentorship. Like, now's the time to do that. You don't, it's appropriate to do that now, because we're all needing that, and we can all take care of each other now. Like that. I mean, please, can you do that? Can you make that?
I need to recruit some grandmas, but yes.
No problem.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No problem. I mean, I just think, yes, the generational wisdom and pull and guidance, like, you can find that. It's here. It's everywhere.
I'll keep you posted. I'll keep you posted on that.
Sorry, Leslie. I'm not giving you another thing to do, but if you would like to birth that into the world, I would fully support that. And I'll be a grandma one day, but I will also be that woman right now.
Yeah. So, right. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we heard it on here, so I'll keep you posted.
Yes. Yeah. Please email us at info@howwegetthrough if you want to be at that college, because I think this is a great idea. My gosh, Leslie.
And it was government supported. I remembered that too.
Fuck yeah.
You know?
Better be. Yes.
Talk about that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Yeah. So good. Leslie, it's always a pleasure being with you. Can you please tell our listeners where to find you? What are you doing? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So if you are interested in working with me or just, perhaps going to this college at some point, you can reach me at my website is Piece by Piece, which is kind of the play on words. It's PIECE by Piece, PEACE, therapy.care. So that is my website. I'm on Instagram. And that one is Piece by Piece Therapy. And yeah, those are probably the two best ways to find me.
And you do yoga, like kind of coaching sessions 101 if you're not in the area?
Right. Yep. So if you're interested and you live in South Carolina and you want therapy, that could be an avenue. Or if you're not in the area, we can talk about yoga or doing internal family systems through coaching.
Yes. Okay. So if you take the course on mom anxiety and you're like, Leslie's the bomb, and I'm like, duh, I know. You can go ahead and reach her there and do a personal session of where this stuff is showing up for you and how to move it. So thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to our show. We hope that we've provided a space for you to enter into your own healing around mom anxiety. And if you're ready to dive deeper, check out Leslie's course, Mom Anxiety, on the How We Get Through app, available for both Android and iPhone. Stay tuned for next week's episode as we meet another new therapist, Kelsey Grimm, who continues our talks about intergenerational shame and trauma and the potential we have to be as cycle breakers. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.